Well, hi, everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us for another Webster Careers webinar. Very happy to have you join us today for the topic Answering the Most Common Interview Questions. We'll be getting going just a minute. Just wanted to say hello to everybody, and we have John Link, the Director of Career Development and Planning at Webster University, presenting today's topic, which is a good one. I really like this one, actually. We work so hard to get the interview, and we've done the resume, we've done the networking, we've done the applying, probably maybe a phone screening, but now here we are on this interview, and we want to make the most of it. So do we end up feeling really nervous? Do we feel comfortable in our own skin? Are we ready for what they're going to ask us? Well, that's what today's webcast is all about. So at this point, I just wanted to say hello, John. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thanks, James, and thanks to all of our viewers. Today, we are excited to share information about this next step in the hiring process. You're likely exploring opportunities that are currently out there, whether they're remote or in person. The one constant part of this process that has yet to change is how you're going to get there, and interviewing is part of that process that's going to require some ongoing practice so that you can feel confident when you're moving to that next stage of the hiring process. So I'm excited to share information today about the most frequently asked questions in interviews, and also some different approaches and considerations for responding to those types of questions, or at least having some sort of prep in place, so that when you are moving into that conversation, you are doing so with confidence and at least have some sort of canned or talking points that you can review when you are going into any interview. Now, one thing that I think is just really important is just to kind of approach interview preparation and preparing for those types of questions in three different types of stages within the actual interview itself. The first stage being the beginning of the interview, where you typically have the opportunity to just have that introductory, those introductory get to know you questions with either just the interviewer, a panel. Sometimes there are multiple people sitting in or listening in on your interview. So just kind of keeping an idea of who those individuals are, writing down their names so that when you are asked specific questions, you're able to direct your responses to those individuals. It also is an opportunity for you to express your interest and overall summary of your transferable skills and qualifications for that role. The middle part of the interview is equally as important as the beginning. The beginning is going to set the tone for all of the questions that are going to be asked in the beginning, in the middle section of the actual interview. The interviewer here is going to assess fit, your strengths and qualifications, through a variety of different questions, behavioral and knowledge level questions that will give them an indication that you know exactly what the job will entail, and that your skills and qualifications will be suitable for that specific role, and overall assessing your fit. If you are your overall fit within that company or organization is going to be assessed through a variety of different types of questions. But the end is also an opportunity for you to assess fit and get some more information about the company culture, the history of those or that individual who is interviewing you. Maybe you're wanting to learn a little bit more about how they got into their role and what they like most about the company. So there will be some opportunities to share, from my perspective, some questions that you may want to have ready to ask a hiring official when you are approaching that end portion of the interview. So we'll do a deep dive beginning with the start of the interview. And one of the most frequently asked questions in an interview is just telling me about yourself. One, it's an icebreaker type question. It gives you an opportunity to reintroduce yourself, as the first time you may have corresponded with the hiring official was probably when you submitted your application, when they reviewed your resume, your cover letter, and any other components to the application. You were likely introducing yourself through those different formats. When you're introducing yourself or sharing information about yourself in an interview, you need to be able to have a sort of approach that doesn't appear to be scripted. However, you do need an opportunity to highlight a few areas that are going to be essential for setting focus to and direction for the remaining questions in the interview. So a good response for sharing information about yourself in a concise manner is using a present, past, and future formula so that your response can be tailored to your intended audience. You can talk about your current role and responsibilities, and perhaps maybe you'll mention one or two of your strongest strengths or biggest accomplishments. Then you're going to give some backgrounds as far as how you got there and the experience that you have for the position you're interviewing for that's most relevant to bring to this part of the interview. And finally, you're going to express what you're looking forward to in the future. Would you be a perfect fit for this role? That's communicated in this part of the interview. You're expressing your interest. You've laid out your very low level range of skills and qualifications. So now you're going to be able to unpack them a little bit further after you've captured the attention of your audience. Another strong area to kind of be prepared to answer during this stage of the interview is just expressing how you learned about this opportunity. It's obviously an innocuous interview question because it's so frequently asked that we don't necessarily think that we need to have a formulated response. However, sometimes we may have just discovered it on Indeed. We reviewed the job description briefly and we applied, and that was that. We may not have really had any strategic approach to applying for the position or didn't hear about it in any particular way. However, this is a good strategy for hiring officials to learn a little bit more about any promotion that they have on different media platforms for connecting job opportunities with their intended audience. So thinking about this is going to give you an opportunity to express how you learned about the role, where you actively may be searching for roles. So if you learned about it on LinkedIn, they may check out your LinkedIn profile and see a little bit more about what experiences, skills, qualifications you may not have highlighted in your application materials. This also gives them an idea of a little bit about your education, skills you've included, and ways that you interact with the system. If you've learned about a position through somebody who is an internal employee at that company, it's okay to name drop that person, and name dropping, understanding that not everybody has a favorable opinion of anyone who works at a company. It's just important to get clearance from that individual if it's okay to share that you learned about the position if asked at that stage of the interview. The what why do you want to work at this company question is a good way for the employer to gauge why this specific company was on your list, why this specific job was on your list, and strategies to really prepare an articulated response to this type of question is researching everything that you can about this employer and identifying the most captivating part of why you would like to find yourself as part of that company's team, and thinking what's most relevant, what's most aligned to your overall interests is going to help you really knock this question out of the ballpark. So think about that. Think about why this specific company, and always be prepared for this question because it's really going to assess what you've learned before you got to this part of the hiring process. Why do you want this job is similar in the neighborhood of why do you want to work at this company? I think when you are looking at a couple of the key areas of fit for the role. Maybe there's a few areas of the job responsibilities that are enticing to you or most related to what you specifically are bringing to this candidate pool. You need to be able to articulate those clearly to the hiring official so that they understand you know the essential functions of that position and how you are how those skills and qualifications you've acquired through life and experience will be suitable for that specific opportunity. That job, that function, especially if you're career changing, is going to be essential that you understand what your areas of transferable skill or your pack and go skills from one place to the next so that the hiring official clearly knows that this was a part of your plan. You were applying for this job for a reason. You were applying to be a part of this company for a specific reason. It all should be calculated and not appear as if you were just applying for any job that was available for you to apply for. So thinking about this and always having a strong response is going to really resonate with the people who are interviewing you for this role. Also, it's important that if you see opportunities, multiple stages of the hiring process could result in 2, 3, or more interviews as they narrow a pool of candidates down to 1 or 2 2 or more finalists. It's very important to know that you're likely going to be asked a similar set of get to know you questions during every single interview. So keeping those responses, especially if those who have already interviewed you are a part of future interviews where you'll be responding to questions, always considering who those audiences may be so that you're not constantly just sharing and resharing the same information. So if you do know that a hiring official is going to be on that call or in person, if that's the modality you would be interviewing in, always keep things relevant and new with an element of reintroducing yourself for the very first time by adding something new to the process. I have to say though, just really focusing on those get to know you questions are opportunities to strengthen your overall confidence. We often find talking about ourselves to be extremely challenging because we don't respond to those types of questions regularly. It's easier for us to probably respond to the middle stage of the interview questions and then ask questions to the hiring official at the end of the interview than it is during the start. So thinking about how you can really set the tone for all of the great content you're now going to be able to share in the middle stage of the interview will be very, very important. A common question that I hear regularly in interviews and coach people to respond to is, tell me about your greatest strength or share with me a little bit about what you are working on or what is your weakness. Greatest strengths, thinking about some of the key areas of skill that will be suitable, most valuable and significant for that specific job is going to be a valuable part of your response. So instead of rattling off some adjectives that describe your overall strengths and qualifications, think about some of the most significant skills and abilities that the employer is going to really say, yes, this person has these desired skills. They were able to articulate them clearly and identified them as personal strengths. And those are opportunities for that value to come transfer into our organization with ease. If you are hoping to mention something that hasn't yet been asked and it is a personal strength, maybe that's an opportunity for you to showcase that in this part of the interview as well. One thing that I think is so important in the age of COVID-19 is to really think about some of the areas of skill that the employer is going to emphasize as important if you are working in a virtual modality. So teamwork and collaboration, even if your team members are not across the aisle or across the hall from you, if they're 2, 3, 400 miles away from you? How are you able to maintain collaboration, communication, and overall a team dynamic that's going to contribute to the success of the organization? So thinking about some of those areas of skill that are going to be valuable if you are starting off work in a virtual format, or even if you will be working exclusively from home, or exclusively this is an essential job that you'll be working in person. How are some of those strengths going to come out as you found adaptability to some of the new guidelines as different companies and cultures have adapted all over the world? For weakness, I think this is one of the areas that an employer is looking to see if you really identify something that is an opportunity for you to improve upon personally and professionally. Many of these skill areas are going to be opportunities for you to show accountability for developing a personal action plan that's going to be a strength eventually. So I wouldn't find an area that would be a key skill in the actual job. I would make sure that you're keeping it as genuine as possible without trying too hard here. For instance, if you are someone who is extremely you thrive extremely well in diverse team structured organizations. You have excellent interpersonal communication or relatability skills. And during the pandemic, that engagement had decreased as many people may have been working flexible remote work hours, and you've kind of lost that in-person exchange or spirit that you really enjoyed about your work. You can talk about an opportunity for you to strengthen. One of your skills has been just your adaptability. Adaptability to new environments has been something that you really haven't had to explore regularly, but during this time of social distancing, not only in our personal lives, but modified operations, we've been able to really own how adaptable and flexible we have become as professionals. And I think those skills are going to not really be framed as weaknesses, but how you've been able to take something and really bring it into this circumstance that many of us have found ourselves in, and really use it to your advantage during the interviewing process here. So thinking about that, thinking about the weakness, but don't frame it as a weakness. Turn it around and own it and talk about it as an opportunity for you to have grown or developed a new skill that you really didn't have to use before, or wasn't really relevant to your role, and now is going to benefit your future employer. Your greatest professional achievement, this sounds so much like boxing yourself into one specific highlight of your career thus far. I think really focusing on framing this around, up until this point, let me tell you a little bit about a situation where this was the result. So using the STAR method, the situation, the task, the action, and the result is going to help you really build some context behind your example, articulate how you were able to really take initiative or action, and then the desired outcome, or the outcome that you were recognized as an achievement, is going to be very important to the overall resolution or solution of the example that you're going to share with the employer. It's really important to think here about just being humble and being as genuine as possible. And any opportunity, especially if you're working in a team structured environment or will be working in a team structured organization, is to not focus exclusively on I, or my contribution was pivotal to this project's success. Collaboration is so important in many different companies. So thinking about how you can really focus on um, uh, being a leader, being collaborative, and also celebrating the achievements of all, because your success is the success of the company. Thinking about that in a very tailored way is going to be very important. So thinking of a few different examples that you can provide will be helpful when you're, pulling them out of your wheelhouse and articulating them to your audience. Conflicts in the workplace, conflict in general sounds just negative, and conflict is not always going to be rigored with any sort of negative connotation. So it's important to think about the benefits of conflict. For instance, conflict typically will result in exercising your critical thinking, problem solving, analytical thinking skills. So working through any sort of conflict will help the employer understand how you've navigated any specific challenge, how you were able to move through that using information for the betterment of the situation, and what its resolve was. That STAR method that I mentioned in the previous type of question, the situation, task, action, and results formula, could also be really important to frame your response and build context when sharing your story. It's also important that when you're selecting any sort of example, that you're not necessarily focusing on a conflict or a challenge with any particular person. I would steer clear, in my opinion, away from sharing any stories where you may not have been able to get along with someone, and how that may have disrupted your progress or their progress to complete their work. I would keep it very, very much focused on a work-related problem, task-related problem, that you can really focus on how you and you may have worked as part of a team to find a resolution. Demonstrating leadership skills, there's so many layers of skills within the leadership framework that are important to emphasize and are essential to your success. Leadership is not just about being the one to make the decisions. It's about being the one who can manage others, who can develop others, who recognizes how important mission-focused, mission-driven activities are going to drive what your company or what your department is responsible for. Taking initiative, being a part of the solution, and allowing others to be a part of that is going to show the type of leader that you are going to be if you are hired in this role. If you know that this position is going to have any sort of project leads, project work where you will be managing any projects, or if you're going to be supervising others, it's good to tailor this kind of response to that question. It's so important that you're highlighting those areas of leadership strengths that will be of value to your audience here. So thinking about what those examples can be and being prepared to go a little bit deeper in any follow-up questions that they may be able to ask you will really show how engaged they are about those demonstrated leadership skills and how they'll transfer into this new role if you're selected to move forward in the hiring process. Disagreeing with somebody at work is always going to be something that we're going to see. We're going to see people and hear our colleagues maybe not always be in alignment with what our thoughts are or opinions are about what's happening. However, what is important to keep in mind here is your approach to handling any sort of disagreement in a professional manner, and learning how you were able to move forward, collaborate, even if sometimes there is not agreement in how a decision has been made or what the end result is. You still have to be focused on one key thing. What is the company's mission? What is the objective of the activity or the specific, in this example, important component to any able to manage or perspective and shape what the final decision may be, or if you're able to provide any are um, any sort of dynamic, how you handle any sort of dynamics in that team organization if you in disagreement with somebody. All of those skills can be so important to have on display, even just where you able to an employer may be able to assess that kind of dynamic you interact with, prepare why are you leaving your current position, or why is there a gap in your employment of questions, because it's easier to be candid and honest and sincere when you're wanting to be as your most genuine professional self in this kind of dynamic. When you are focusing on how you will tailor these types of responses to the current interview that you will be finding yourself in, think specifically about how you are looking as part of a 3 to 5 year plan of growth. You acquired knowledge or skills to advance to the next level, and that this company or this position is in alignment with what that next step of your career path is, and focusing on those skills, because those succeed how you will be presented to the employer is going to be essential. So thinking about that as looking forward to continuous growth, and that you are prepared with the knowledge and the skills to be ready for that next opportunity, and this employer is within that sort of goal plan. So thinking about that and making sure that they understand that, and how the current position that you are interviewing for is a part of that goal, is going to be important. Gap in your employment. There's going to sometimes be gaps in employment. There are so many reasons. However, and being as genuine and comfortable sharing this as possible. For instance, if you were relocating with a your previous state to your current state, then explaining that is going to resonate with the employer, that you were focusing on how you would transition into that new role while being supportive to your spouse. It could also be that you were on a contract with a particular employer, and that you started applying for new positions after your contract had expired, because you wanted to give your entire attention to the project work at hand. So some inferences can come about there, like, wow, there's a strong work ethic there. This person is disciplined. This person has been able to really focus on ensuring that progress was met up until the very last point of their expiring contract. There's a lot of natural inferences. Sometimes we have to connect the dots for the interviewer, but in this instance, you're the one in the driving seat. So think about how you want to really focus on responding to this type of question, while not making it sound like you're completely out of touch with what areas of skill and function you can immediately pick back up with in this specific role. Asking people about their current salary is not legal in every single state, so it's really important to know what the jurisdiction laws are for anybody questioning you about what your current salary is. So, for instance, if you're asked about what your current salary is and you've felt um, uh, and you feel comfortable sharing information about that, then I would say proceed with what judgment you believe is most going to benefit you in this process. Sometimes this question is asked because the employer may have a very specific salary cap that they can't go over when offering somebody a position. And if your current salary exceeds that, that gives them a little bit of an idea of what they may not be able to provide if you're their ideal candidate. So thinking about how you want to respond to this, and if you don't feel comfortable, there's a response like, before discussing any salary, I'd really like to learn more about what this position entails. You could express that you've done some research on the company, you've reviewed information included in the Bureau of Labor Statistics and other employment databases. You've assessed the average or mean salary information both at the state level and the national level, and you may be able to assess specifically where you're currently at and share that information with the employer. But whatever you approach, how you approach this question will be important if it's asked. And what do you like least about your job? This is one of those gotcha questions, so you have to tread carefully here. The last thing that anyone wants to hear is any complaining from your current role or any previous roles. So always frame this as positively as you can, even though it's a very negative focused question. Maybe it could be that your current position has evolved evolved so quickly and absorbed so many new responsibilities that you feel that you've been able to really learn and grow a lot. And since you have grown and evolved in this position with so many new experiences, you want to focus on one of those new skills or qualifications in a role where you can just be an exclusive subject matter expert in and bring that value to that new company or that new employer. So thinking about positive ways that you can approach this is going to be extremely important, as you don't want your future employer potentially to think that in that next interview, you're going to be potentially speaking ill of them. So thinking about this is going to require some calculated decision making and how you'll approach it. But I'm sure with whatever response you may think of, you're going to be able to really express how you will bring value into this new role with this particular job. What are you looking for in a new position? And what type of work environment do you prefer? These need to be tailored to the actual position you're interviewing for. If you're extremely interested in this role, it should be tailored to this specific opportunity. So for instance, if you like working independently and this company is all about teamwork and collaboration, and you say, well, I'm really looking for an opportunity to work solo. I really do best when I work alone. Well, they're going to be like, no, this person's going to be miserable here. They're not going to last long because this is a team structured organization. This person's going to have to collaborate. So they're going to not find themselves satisfied in this role. Where if you're looking at a work environment that is diverse and they have a very clear position on how they have developed a diverse, inclusive, and equitable workspace, then you want to be able to communicate that that is the type of environment that you're looking for, and that you may be able to see that within the current company profiles of those who are staffed there, and anybody who's interviewing you. So thinking about that is going to give you an opportunity to showcase your commitment to different areas that the employers tried to cultivate through their workplace culture, an opportunity for you to also articulate that as something that you are looking for in a position. This next question and other questions related to this, like personal questions, are illegal. Hiring decisions cannot be made based off of um, uh, your gender, your sexual orientation, um, any sort of nationality, religious affiliation. A hiring official cannot ask you if you are planning to have children. That's a huge red flag if those questions are asked, and they are asked. They are asked. I sat in on, not at my current employer, but many, many years ago when I taught elementary school, sat in a debriefing session after interviewing multiple candidates for a kindergarten position. And that one of the first things that the administrator said was, I forgot to ask her if she was going to have children because we can't hire another teacher who's going to be out on maternity leave. And I just was so shocked by, the fact that that was even stated in this debriefing session. I was glad that this question wasn't asked during the interview. It'd be very inappropriate and uncomfortable to respond to. So always thinking about what you know is to be appropriate questions that the hiring official can ask and what inappropriate questions that you don't need to provide answers to. A very respectful way to kind of move in that direction could be, I'm not quite there yet, but I'm interested in the career paths at this company. So can you tell me more about that? So that you're redirecting it, the energy is going back into your qualifications, not any hypotheticals or any cosmetic areas of difference that they're trying to get clarity on. That's none of their business. Where do you see yourself in 5 years is a pretty loaded question. And it's okay to not have an answer for this, but you need to be focused on how this next opportunity will fit in within somewhere of your 5-year trajectory. For instance, if you are focused on becoming a marketing executive at a Fortune 100 company by the end of your 5 years, like that's your end goal, there's probably 3 or more jobs that you're likely going to have before you get to that position or even qualified for that position. So thinking about where you want to be and then filling in those steps, how this next step or this next job is aligned to that specific goal that you have is going to resonate with your employer. It's also going to be a good indicator if you've done your homework. For instance, if there are no opportunities for advancement within the current company because the hierarchy is just very flat, there's really not a lot of middle level or higher level positions, then they may understand that your investment in that company may be very minimal over those next few years. But if there's multiple opportunities to expand and grow and evolve in that company and maybe achieve your end goal within that time frame, then that could be an opportunity for you to thrive in that specific company. So thinking about what your 5-year plan is, what your end goal is, and how you're going to get there, this job you're interviewing for is likely going to be a part of that puzzle. It goes back to goal setting, it goes back to planning, and it will help you really paint a picture of yourself as being focused on your personal and professional growth plan. So think about this very strategically, as it's a very common question asked in the interview for most professional positions. Now, the last step or stage of the interview is just the end stage. And this is an opportunity for you to exercise any information that you weren't able to gather when researching the employer or researching the job. So there's a few areas for you to really think about. One is talking about or requesting more information about training and development. So what opportunities are there for you to learn everything that you need to learn, how this company operates, and how you'll be able to be set up for success to do your role? Is that system in place? Asking questions about that can really help the employer know that you're committed to doing your job well. So think about what may be a good way for you to request that information by identifying some questions you want to prepare in advance. Now, it is possible that some of the information that the employer shares at the beginning of the interview can cover some of the questions that you may have already prepared. That's completely okay. That's why you have to be flexible and brainstorm things and maybe listen carefully when the employer speaks, so that if there is something that they may not go into depth about, you can then use that later on during this stage of the interview and ask them a follow-up question about information they shared. The next two areas of questions that you can ask would be related to your work performance and then following up about their hiring timeline. Regarding your work performance, thinking about how you will be evaluated or what success looks like for this specific position will really help you understand the expectations, but it will also indicate to the employer that you are used to preparing goals or being evaluated based off of professional and personal goals that you have for your own personal and professional growth within your career, so that you can receive the coaching and scaffolding, if necessary, to build those skills required for your success. So thinking about performance, how it's evaluated, who may be supervising this, how subjective it is it objective? Any way that you can receive regular feedback about workplace performance so that your evaluations give you an opportunity to grow from that feedback is going to show that you are committed to excellence and that you're ready to really focus on how you can build or improve that next skill. Questions about next steps are common questions that we may lead the Q&A from the interviewee to the interviewer off with. I say leave these to the end when you are satisfied with any information that was shared by the hiring official and any information that you'll be able to get as far as where they will be at in the coming days or weeks in deciding on the next step of the interviewing process or extending an offer to their top candidate. So if you're looking at any questions that will help you get this kind of information, one good question could be, is there anything that you reviewed or any information I shared during today's conversation that would indicate that there is a concern about my fit or my skills or qualifications for this role? That'll give you an opportunity if they say, well, you know, we really want someone who has some experience using the sprint approach for problem solving. And, you know, I noticed that you talked about problem solving in a couple of your responses, but you really didn't say if there was a philosophical approach or a framework that you've used. So do you have any familiarity with this approach? And you may say, you know what, that's a great question. I do not have experience with the sprint framework for problem solving. However, I'm very adaptable. I'm able to pick up on new skills rapidly. I know that there is text out there about this specific approach for problem solving, and it's very successful. So that'd be something that I could easily review and catch up to speed with even before a start date, and would be definitely something that would be positive for this next step of my career. So any way for you to then engage more, or convey more information about your professional self to that employer is going to benefit you if you ask those kinds of questions. What's next in the interview process, they'll give you an indication of their timeline. Maybe they're considering a few other people and they'll make decisions about who moves forward in the process by the end of the week. Well, then you have a mental note to put in your calendar regarding when you want to follow up again with that specific employer. So thinking about those questions and how you want to frame this is so important. I will leave you with this, and I know that James will likely have some perspective and some questions that some of you may have already included in the chat box, but I want to be clear on one thing here. It's completely acceptable to come into an interview with pre-listed questions or information that you want to gather at this stage of the interview. It's also important, if there's something that you really do not want to forget to mention, to jot down a note and bring that in your Padfolio so that you can open it, take notes during the interview. No one's going to say you can't take notes. And if they do, I mean, maybe that has already been communicated and you didn't read that in the prep stage of the hiring process. Maybe they gave you a list of do's and do nots. But one thing to keep in mind is that it's so refreshing to see candidates who come prepared for these interviews. And part of that sometimes is maintaining your organization by listing things and being focused when you are asked about them. Don't read a script, but it's okay to have a couple notes. And the final tip is review your resume and cover letter and the job posting before you go into the interview, because that's going to be the most recent information that the interviewer has reviewed when preparing for your conversation. So keep that in mind, because they're going to have some foundational information already. You don't want to just repeat the highlights in your summary or in your last 3 work positions. So think about that and tailor those responses considering what information you use in the application. All right, James, well, is there any information that I can maybe do a deeper dive into, or any questions that our participants have?
Well, hi, John. Actually, I really like this webcast. And I think you did a great job. And a couple of quick questions here. Like I said when I introduced you, the interview is what we're aiming for, right? With all of our career activities, those are the discussions. And so I understand when we feel stressed out about those moments, and then hopefully we can find, through preparation and some practice, just a way to look at them as a great chance to have a conversation. So that's always the goal in my mind. And I think what you've talked about is really key. There's a lot of parts of this that we can drill, and the kinds of things we want to say about ourselves, the kinds of questions we might want to ask the other person. Going into this with intention and not just saying, "Oh, I have an interview. We'll see how it goes." Not many of us can pull off that kind of an interview, especially when the stakes are high, I might say. But I do like the idea of just being comfortable as well. So what a couple of questions. I think a lot of us on this broadcast might be at a stage where we either have changed industries or we will. And I'm actually working with a guy. I mentioned in the last webcast that I manage a team, and one of them is a senior person, but he's new to tech. And so he struggles a little bit, saying, I know how to do a lot of these things, just I don't have a long resume in this area. So he's working on credibility and trying to be where he was in that last field before he joined this new field. So do you have any special recommendations in the interview for somebody who is changing career, kind of like complete career fields? How do you still make it so you want to communicate that you're not starting at square zero, that you want to start you know, um, in a place reflective of the experience that you're bringing?
Right. So a specific example and try to pull it out to be more general is when approaching career change, if you've, say, been misplaced, you've been laid off, and this is now an opportunity for you to focus on what comes next, and you're going through, the decision-making cycle of, what am I really interested in, and how do I want to prepare myself for that transition? I think the why is so important in understanding what areas of transferable skill and qualifications you have is going to be the most valuable component to building your confidence when approaching this position or approaching this next step. Your goal for this change has to be rooted in a strong reason, a personal, professional reason for the why. And defining career change and really understanding what career change is also important here. Career change is not moving from, I was the project manager at this architectural engineering firm, and now I'm the senior project manager of this architectural engineering firm. That's not career change. Career change may be you are a marketing professional at a nonprofit company, and you are now looking at marketing positions in a financial organization because you're really interested in financial services. Well, this is, a shift in industry. This is a shift in something that you're going to have to gather information about so that you can feel confident that this is the right next move. So part of that is research, a lot of focus questions, and then feeling confident that you have a great understanding of your transferable skills, the skills you've acquired through life, work, and any other areas of continuing education that will give you leverage when you're approaching this sort of change. It's also important that you are completely doing an overhaul of your personal branding materials so that it reflects what that goal is. This may be extremely important to how you will promote yourself to these positions. So think about that, but in the end, it all comes down to you have to be confident personally about your ability to meet your goal for this specific change.
I think that's part of it. I really like what you said. And I think about this, and a lot of times in life we have a vision for where we want to be, but we're where we are today. And there's the middle period, right? So we go to get a master's degree, and we're in that uncomfortable period for about 2 or 3 years, and then we hop out the other side, and the master's degree is doing stuff for us, right? But we're in those middle periods. So would you say that if you just calling it really realistic, so this is fascinating to me, knowing that people change career fields, and obviously we're in the world that we are today, where the economy shifts and all of a sudden, new jobs are created and old jobs kind of go away. Would you always say that a career industry change entails dropping down a few rungs until you prove yourself, or does it not necessarily have to be like that?
It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. I think it all goes back down to how you are equipped with the knowledge, experience, skill, ability, and any initiative to show that if there is a lacking of some desired qualification that you can quickly learn or get exposure to so that you can improve a specific skill that is needed for success within that shift. It's also important to really understand that sometimes if part of your goal is to work at a very specific employer and your change involves working to build up to that desired position, then yes, you may have to take down a few notches when you're looking at opportunities to grow within that company to get to that desired position, but that's your target employer. One thing that is so important to consider here is that you would need to tailor those applications to ensure that you are not looking way overqualified for an opportunity if you have 10 plus years of experience and you're looking at entry level positions for that maybe recent graduates are also applying for. So thinking about what that goal is and really tailoring not only your application materials, but how you approach any follow-up communication after you have applied for the opportunity, and then follow up and tailoring responses like, why are you changing careers? What are you interested in? And I'll tell you what, your interests are more valuable to than any skills you have yet to improve upon or develop, because I cannot teach you to like something. So the employer has obviously done something to attract you. This is your opportunity to showcase that in your applications and also when you're interviewing. So be very clear about those personal goals, because that's going to be what sells yourself to those opportunities and what will give you the confidence you need to be successful.
I think that's great advice. I mentioned my colleague just a moment ago, and I said he's kind of struggling. He was in the restaurant industry. He was a manager. He was a boss and really well regarded, but he wanted to get into tech in the second part of his career. And so there's a a bit of a he's a newbie for some of these things, but his interest in what we do is so high that I cannot help but be totally impressed with this guy. He has a spot on my team. I will build my team around him. He just needs to to convert that interest into some of the stuff that you have when you've been in industry for a while. So I think that interest, I love the way you put that, and I think that as a manager, that is a differentiator for me when I see somebody truly expressing interest, because I know that they're going to keep learning, they're going to fight through little challenges, they're going to problem solve. So I love the ability to demonstrate, like you said, interest in the employer during the interview. I have a quick ask, John, from the audience. Someone was wondering if you could share the link to the slide share.
Of course, yeah. So in
So,
the chat box,
yeah,
I'll send this to you, James, and you can share that with the participants. I'll just unshare my screen, but I'll get you all the um, web link to today's presentation. It'll
fantastic.
also link to some information that's included on Webster University's Career Planning and Development Center website, including resume writing tips and also other application material, um, um, guides and sample documents that could really help build your confidence when you're preparing for that next step. And sometimes interviewing really is just kind of, the final cherry on top component to how you'll piece together all of your preparation in getting yourself in front of those different audiences. But the first component is really just understanding what your goal is and being able to articulate all of those clearly to whoever your intended audience is.
And that's the last question I would ask. I know we're at the end of the hour here. And I think about the audience that we might have on this call, Webster University graduates, a lot of them with advanced degrees, and where are they on this planet? They're everywhere, right? And they're every industry. And a lot of folks go to really do really complicated things, like people in the military. They learn technologies and acronyms and stuff that the regular population might not understand. The same thing is true of engineers and accountants. The things that you learn might not be understandable by someone who's not a specialist in your area. So I've always thought about interviewing, especially for the kind of audience that we have here, John, the highly educated audience, is the ability to translate yourself for the person who's listening. And you might know super complicated things, but the interviewer might not be at your level. They might not understand where you're coming from. They might want to know why you would do a transition from one career to the other. And it boils down to, can we translate our past into a message that's easily digested by the person we're talking to? Might be a person way younger than us, might be a person who doesn't understand the field, might be a person who doesn't want to understand the field. They just want to do their job, maybe in HR. So I think that's super
Right.
fascinating, John, to be a translator. What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, I think in general, just really having a firm knowledge of yourself and what unique skills you bring, and then thinking innovatively and creatively, whatever that specific next step may be in your career, how you'll get there. And I think 90% of it is just attitude and confidence that you can do it. Um, and if your goal is something goals are supposed to be challenging. So if your goal is something that is going to keep you engaged, you're interested in it, and there's something about it that's going to just keep you tapped into wanting to make progress toward that, you're going to feel so much more ready to be into that next step of your career with that specific opportunity in mind, than anybody telling you that this goal is not going to be something easily obtained because you don't have the desired skills or qualifications yet. So I think just really focusing on really your own skills, strengths, and interests, and how you'll package that to your audience is going to be the most important part here.
Well, very cool. And we just hit 1 o'clock on the dot Central Time here. Great hour, John. Just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Check out the event calendar. We have more great webcasts coming up in the future. And John, thank you for a great job. Not only is it great information, but I feel motivation in what you say too. I feel like belief, and I truly believe that's the way to kind of manage a career is just the believing in it, and I think I felt both the inspiration and the great information in what you said. So thank you so much today for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And thank you to all of our listeners today. I look forward to your future participation at Webster.career events.
Take care, everybody. Have a great holiday if you can.